Hello, how are you?
Hi.
I'm so excited to have with me today Sara Abiqwa. And Sara and I met about a year and a half ago, which is crazy because I feel like I've known you for a lifetime, like
Me
lifetimes
too.
actually,
Lifetime.
lifetimes with
Exactly.
an S.
Yeah. I'm so happy to be here. By the way, we've been wanting to do this for quite some time now.
It's true. I remember even when I came to Kuwait, I was like, we should like definitely record a
Yeah.
podcast together because you and I can literally have the longest
Yeah.
conversations and talk for hours.
But also, when we always have conversations, we're like, this can be a podcast episode.
Yes, like whenever we're like organizing women's circles,
Yeah.
we end up like having a Zoom call and then we start talking and we're like, why didn't we record this? Like
Yeah.
we should have recorded this. This could have been a podcast episode easily. And so today I feel like we want to talk a little bit about what it means to be an empowerment coach, like a self-empowerment coach, and what empowerment means to you. So we're getting right into it right
I love
away.
that. And by the way, I love this question because a lot of the times people used to call me like a life coach, and I used to always say, no, I'm a self-empowerment coach. And the reason why I say that, with all respect, of course, to all life coaches, but I believe that you need to empower and start change within yourself before it goes into other areas of your life. So everything starts with you. And that happened with me because of my personal journey. When I wanted to change a lot of things and I was going through a very hard time, which we can talk about now, I feel like it all started from within me. I needed to come to a place inside myself where I'm like, I want to create change for myself and then start doing it. So that's why when I became a coach, I was like, I want to coach women on that, on how it starts from within them and with them. So they can then look at other areas in their life and be like, okay, this is what I want to do. And I'm going to start create it, but I'm going to start with myself first.
I really love that, by the way, because it does start with the self and having more and more self-awareness about the choices that you're making and also the choices that you don't realize that you're making every single day, right?
Yeah.
And you're kind of living in that autopilot mode. And so I would say being a self-empowerment coach is really taking people out of autopilot, because when you're living in that mode of just repeating things every single day in the same way, you kind of lose yourself in all of that. It just becomes something that's automatic.
Yeah.
And so you bring a lot of awareness into the person's life by showing them, okay, like what are the areas where you feel disempowered? And I would say that
love
for
that.
women, especially, it's probably in a lot of areas of their lives. Like you can touch every single aspect, whether it's their relationships, whether it is with their partners, their children, their colleagues, whether it's with the food that they're choosing to eat or not eat, all of these things. So it's like you literally are touching every single element of a person's life.
Exactly. And I always tell my clients, I'm like, if you start the journey of change externally, you're going to be like a firefighter. There's a fire here. For example, something in my career, I need now to attend to that. And then I need to attend to my relationships and then attend to the way I'm eating or my fitness or my health. But I'm like, all of this, the only thing that's in common between all of these areas is you, right? And I remember when I started my journey, the thing that made a huge difference for me is understanding that I have a sense of agency in my life, right? Because like you said, we're disempowered in so many areas in our lives, but sometimes even this disempowerment is so unconscious. You don't know that you're disempowered. So you're just there feeling unfulfilled or maybe feeling like something is missing in your life. And you're like, okay, then what is it? Where do I start? And I think we both hear that a lot, like, okay, I want to create change, but where do I begin? And I feel like it all begins with, like you said, a moment of self-awareness with yourself and a moment of honesty, saying, you know what, in my life, I'm feeling 1, 2, 3, 4, and I feel like I'm stuck in 1, 2, 3, 4, and I want to create change for myself. And then you go back to that one thing that maybe sometimes we forget. That's why I always say I remember, because we forget that we can have agency, right? And that we can have a choice. And then it ends up being like, okay, if the choice is mine, what choices do I want to start making? Because there's no such thing as such just a small choice. You said how they eat. Sometimes they're like, come on, it's just one meal. Or how they dress, or how they move, or what career choice they want to choose. Sometimes it's something so small. Sometimes it's something so big, but both are equally important, right? Because little by little, when you show up in ways where you're not honoring your truth, and you keep doing that day after day in small little things, you wake up one day and you're like, who am I? I feel so disconnected. I feel so out of alignment. I feel like my life is taking me to a direction that I didn't expect that I'm going to go in. And then you're like, okay, then let me come back and ask myself, what do I want?
And when was that first awakening for you? Because you mentioned that there was clearly a point in your life where you realized for yourself, wait a minute, do I even want to be here? And you made those changes for yourself. So what was that pivotal point in your life where you're like,
Yeah, that's
this is not exciting
This is not
anymore,
working.
and this is
Yeah.
not working for me?
Yeah, I feel like it was more than one moment, but the first moment, and I always say this, the first moment when I was like, what do I want, was when I chose my partner. Because you know that saying that says, if you want to make the wrong decision, ask everyone around you. Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that so much.
So when I met him, I was still so young, right? I was 21 years old. At 21, I didn't know like all of this. I didn't know self-awareness. I didn't know my values. I didn't know anything back then. I didn't even start my journey back then. So when I was making that choice, I kept reaching out to other people. Like I knew I loved him. I knew I wanted to be with him. But then I had so many external voices of like people telling me what to do. And it didn't feel right for me and it didn't sit well with me. And I was like, fine, I need to go back to myself because whatever they're telling me, I'm not feeling and it's not sitting well with me. So what do I want? And it was so scary because I've never asked myself this question. And it was for something that's actually major, choosing your life partner, right? So I knew I loved him. I knew I felt safe with him. I knew all of that. But then I was like, it's a decision that I'm making for myself. And it was both scary and empowering at the same time because I was like, oh my God, I don't know what to do. But at the same time, I was like, I'm making this for myself. And I remember I talk about safety because that was one of the major indications that he's my person. It felt safe. And now looking at this 14 years later, until this day, I feel like every decision that comes from your heart and that is true and right for you makes you feel safe, right? So it makes you feel, it relaxes your nervous system because it's good for you. And no one taught us to check in with our nervous system when we make a choice, right? We're always like, what makes sense? What's logical? What should I be doing? What's the right next step? And we're so obsessed with what's right, we forget to feel into our decisions and we're always just thinking in the head. And now I believe that you can't just use your mind to make your decisions. Like the mind is amazing. I'm not disregarding the mind, but I'm like, you need to check in with yourself first and then bring the mind on board to make that happen for yourself. So you're like, yeah, this feels good in my body. It feels good in my nervous system. I'm going to do that. Then you bring in the mind and be like, okay, how do I navigate this? And you start creating a plan to how you want to approach the situation. So sometimes we look at things as either black or white, either fully live intuitively and disregard the mind or fully live in the mind. And I'm always an advocate of, no, we can live with both at the same time because both are actually very necessary, but we can't lead from the mind because the mind is so limited, right? The mind is limited to what we already know, to experiences we've already been through. And I always tell my clients, if you just follow the mind, it's like you have a box of chocolates and certain flavors, and you keep pulling out from the same box, you're going to keep pulling out the same flavors because that's what's in the box. So when you want to do something new or something maybe scary or something that makes you step into the unknown, or like something so expanded but it's new, you can't then go to the mind and be like, make a decision for me, because it's unfair. The mind is going to be like, I don't know, it's new, it's unknown, it's scary, don't do it. Right? And then you just want to go back to what you already know. But if you check in with yourself and you're like, oh my God, I'm so scared, but it still feels right, and my body feels expanded and my nervous system is relaxed and I feel like it's right for me, then you're like, okay, fine, I'm gonna do it, but then I'm gonna ask the mind to help me navigate how I want to do it.
It's so interesting because you said so many different things that I'm like, okay, what am I going to talk about next, or like ask you? Because you talked about the self, and you talked about the mind being different to the self. So it's a big question to ask you, what is the self? Who is the self, right? Because you're talking about these different entities truly, where the mind in a lot of ways now has become the master for many people versus the servant, right? It's like we've allowed the mind to take over a big part of our lives, perhaps too big of a part in our lives. And it's like, how do we start to understand the mind and the mechanisms of the mind and the programming installed in the mind so that we get to really uncover the true self, right? And the true self probably does guide us a lot of the times to do things that we feel is out of our comfort zone. And that's where we grow, that's where we learn, that's where we may fall down sometimes and have to pick ourselves back up. And so when you are a self-empowerment coach or you're looking to empower yourself, would you agree that it's also about taking a leap of faith and going into the unknown without necessarily, you know, having everything figured out, but you're just doing it because you trust that physical, visceral feeling in your body versus the mind that is literally like going from left to right, up and down, and, you know, going in like a million different scenarios that probably will not happen.
100%, 100%. You said something, going forward without having everything figured out. And I feel like we never have anything figured out. We think we have things figured out.
I mean,
or we'd love to think that we have things figured out, but we don't have things figured out. Like, I'm going to ask you this question, and maybe everyone also that's listening, have you ever had everything figured out in any moment in your life?
I thought I did, that's for sure. Right? When I started working corporate and I had graduated in finance, I thought that's my path. Easy, right?
I have it figured out.
I have it figured out. I graduated high school, I graduated university. Now I'm working a corporate job, a job that so many people would love to have. And okay, we're doing this. And then I'm like, wait a minute, is this the path? Is this what people do without questioning things? And this is where the mind actually served me. Like, as much as I had zero control over the thoughts in my mind at that time because I didn't really have the tools, it served me because it asked questions. It asked the questions that I needed to ask myself. Is this what I want? I'm tired all the time. I'm depleted. I leave work, I run to a yoga class because that's the only thing that is going to make me cope in my relationships without like spilling my anger over onto people. And that's where I feel I was very humbled early on to see that adults don't have anything figured out either. And that's been a very big illusion that we might have thought of when we were younger. And, you know, you do all of this healing and you end up, you know, doing a lot of inner child work and you're like, whoa, actually, even my parents didn't have this figured out. So realistically speaking, I think that a lot of people think that they have things figured out, and then life somehow humbles you to make you realize
you don't. And also, listen, that's part of what makes life exciting. Imagine we have everything figured out. That's so boring because you're going to be like, okay, I'm going to do this, then that, then that, then that. And sometimes you look at certain people, and I was one of them, that my life was a checklist, right? Of like, you graduate, you go work, you get married, you have kids. Everything is just a checklist. But then I was like, What do I want? I think that's a question we barely ask ourselves growing up. What do I really, really want, right? Because that's so important. And I feel like part of allowing yourself to acknowledge that I don't have anything figured out. And when I want to make a choice or a decision, it's not about that I know all of the aspects of where I'm going to go with this choice or decision, because you never know, right? Sometimes you say, I want to make this decision to go here, but then the universe will be like, no, 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 you're going to go there. So if you're super attached also to a certain result in your life, you're going to be disappointed most of the time. And I feel like for a very long time in my life, I was disappointed because I had a certain expectation of what my life should be. I graduated. I started working in one of the big 4 financial investment companies. And I was like, this is going to be my path. But then I wasn't happy. So I was disappointed because I was like, I thought I had this figured out, but then I was miserable. So instead of asking myself what I want, I started asking myself, what's wrong with me? What's wrong with me? I'm ambitious. I'm someone who loves to grow and to learn. Everyone around me, they want to go places with this. I don't. I go there, I sit at my desk, I get my promotions. I'm like, fine, but nothing feels good for me. And I'm like, what is wrong with me? And I feel like without the awareness that it's okay to sometimes not know, you think if you don't know, there's something wrong with you. And for a very long time, in so many different decisions, or so many different situations, if I didn't know in that moment, I always used to feel like it's my mistake. I need to fix something in myself. But now looking back to that version of myself, I'm like, I love you and I have so much compassion towards her. And I'm like, I'm sorry at the same time, because there's nothing wrong with you if you don't know what you want. On the contrary, if you don't know what you want, that's the first step of actually knowing what you want. Because the first thing I told myself was like, this is not for me. I don't want this. And then I was like, okay, but what do I want instead? And I didn't have the answer. So also allowing yourself sometimes to be like, I don't know what I want, but I'm going to allow myself to be comfortable with not knowing, but being open to explore other avenues of my life to actually figure out what is it that I do want. And it started because I always get this, like, how do I know? How do I know? And I always used to feel like there should be like a big philosophical answer, of like, this is how you know. But then I was like, you just know. I think for me, it was until this day, I just know depending on if something makes me feel good on the inside. And good doesn't mean easy. It just means it makes me feel a bit expanded, or it excites me, or it makes me feel interested. I'm like, I want to know more about this, or maybe do more of this. And it's all in this. We always talk about this. We always say it's not complicated, right? It's simple, but because we're so used to complicating things in our lives, we never think that the answer is simple. We always look for a complicated answer or a zillion tools or practices that are going to help you reach a magical place in your life. But it's all in the small, simple, small, precious moments of awareness where you start tapping into something that you've never tapped into before, that starts making micro shifts in your life. And then your entire life takes a new direction.
I totally agree. That's definitely how it worked out for me too. When I left my corporate job, I knew what I loved.
Yeah.
I was already certified in Reiki and yoga and health coaching. And I was like, okay, we're going to start piecing these things together. And it took a few years, honestly, for me to figure it out. And there was a lot of trial and there was a lot of error. And with that, a lot of resilience and strength came through. And as you were speaking, the topic of unworthiness came through to me, right? Because why is it that at some point in our journeys, we believe that this was the best that we could get, right? It's like, this job is the best thing I can do. This relationship is the best relationship I can be in. These friendships are the best friendships I can have. And it's because there is an inherent belief that you cannot get any better, right?
Yes.
Like, this is the most you're gonna get. And I feel like one of the foundations of being empowered is how worthy you feel about yourself, right?
Yes.
Do you recognize that you are worthy and abundantly worthy at it too, that there is no limits to that? I feel like having that reprogrammed and reconciliated in my own being, that's what allowed me to really shift and do the things that I was terrified of, but I believed that I was worth taking the risk for, that was worth it. And
Yes.
to take that bet on myself and be like, we're doing this.
Yeah,
It's
it's
worth doing
happening.
this. It's happening. I don't know why or how,
But it's happening.
it's happening. If this is a call from, call it God, the universe, source, the divine, then I must answer that call.
Yes. You said something before that I want to go back to because it was powerful. You said the word questioning. And I feel it always starts with that, because growing up, each and every one of us was handed a box, and you're like, come step into this box, right? Of like, this is how you're going to be living. This is who you're going to be, whether this is and I love my parents so much, but whether it's from your parents or society or external expectations of like, this is who you're going to be. And then now come be that. And then because you've been primed for that or your life, you think it's normal. You don't even question it. So that's why when you start questioning things of like, what do I want? Because the question of what do I want has to do with your sense of self-worth. Because if you believe that you're worthy, you're going to ask yourself what I want, right? But if you don't, you're never going to ask yourself this question. And I remember, but that's also thanks to my mom, when it comes to that, growing up, I feel like she always used to say like, you're so precious, you deserve the best, you're so precious, you deserve the best. And I feel like I had this voice inside my head that I believed, right? Because we believe everything that we're told when we're younger. And I was like, yeah, I do, I deserve, I'm precious, I'm precious. So when I started going into relationships, I always had a standard for what is the kind of relationship that I want to be in? Because if I'm precious and I deserve the best, then this is what I want. And I used to do that unconsciously back then, not knowing that it's actually a tool, right? Because we talk a lot about manifestations and how you manifest things in your life, but we don't talk about what you believe. Because even if you want to manifest everything, but your belief system is vibrating at a very low frequency, you're not an energy match to the thing that you want to manifest in your life. So that's why we go back to self-empowerment, that it starts with you. What do you believe about yourself? What are the stories that you tell yourself about yourself? And in that area, I was lucky because my mom used to say that. But in many other areas, they were like, you're a good achiever, get the straight A's, do this, do that. So I had the healthy belief that said, I'm precious and I'm worthy of everything that's good. But also sometimes I have to achieve this and that to be loved and to be seen as good enough. So the thing that I'm trying to say is there's so many layers to who we are. And that's why yesterday we were talking that the self-discovery journey is layers and layers that you remove. It's not just one moment that changes everything for you. So you start becoming aware of small and simple beliefs about things of like, okay, fine, if I'm in this relationship and I keep attracting the same kind of guy, what is this situation trying to tell me? What am I believing about myself that I keep attracting the same kind of person into my life? And then you're like, oh, okay, maybe it's this story that's making me do this. Then you shift the story, right? Because once you shift the story, you shift the feeling. You shift the feeling, you shift the frequency. You shift the frequency, you start vibrating at a different energy, you attract something new into your life. But we talk about manifestation, like put everything on a vision board and say these affirmations and it's going to happen. No, it's deeper than that. It's really who you're being, what you're thinking, what you're believing, what you're feeling, that then starts to manifest into that in your life. So there's always a moment of, again, going back to honesty with the self. But to be honest with yourself, you need to actually sit with yourself. And sometimes it's easier not to, right? So after I lost my dad in 2009, for almost the first 5 years, I was just running and running and running because I didn't want to feel. I didn't want to sit with the pain. I didn't want to acknowledge that I was going through so much and I've been carrying so much with me. But the moment shifts started to happen in my life is when I actually allowed myself to say, you know what? I'm going to sit with myself and be with however I'm feeling, because I need to listen, and I can't listen to myself if I'm not sitting with myself. If I'm always running, always distracting, always focusing externally, and then I'm like, okay, what do I want? I'm not going to be able to listen. Because there's so much noise, my own voice is going to be lost. I'm going to be like even more confused about what I want. And then you go back in the same cycle of like distraction, or like this doesn't work, or this is not for me. So no, it starts in small micro moments of sitting with yourself in silence to allow yourself to start coming back to yourself. Right?
That's definitely been the case for me. And I feel blessed that I love to meditate. I know it's not the
Oh, me
tool that a
too.
lot of
Yeah.
people love, but meditation has definitely been a tool for me, as well as the yoga practice that has been incredible on my journey to just feel into my body again, to find ways to train this monkey mind of mine, to find ways to be still within my own being.
Yeah.
And everyone is very different energetically, for sure. I would say that you would probably agree with this, is that we are perhaps more sensitive to the world around us. Our energies can be pulled in many different ways. And so to really come back to our center, and that for me is empowerment, when I can be in a chaotic situation and still be rooted and anchored in my own being. That for me is true power as well, where I'm not always reacting to the situation. I'm not saying I always
Yes.
got that under control. For sure, there are
Yeah,
times
it's a
where
journey.
you
Yeah.
just have an explosive moment and it's totally fine. But it's definitely in those moments where you have to just take a bit of a step back, like you said, come into a space of silence and stillness, whatever that looks like for you,
Yeah.
however you choose to do that. And to be honest with oneself, I agree that's been my biggest thing. Like, be honest. How are you feeling? Are you happy? Does this bring you joy? Do you feel expanded by this? Do you want to be tamed by your fears? Does that make you happy to feel like you have so many fears in life? And when the answer was no, it's like, okay, so we've got to work through this and take the steps that you need to take, while being easy on yourself too, right? Because like you said, as you're peeling these layers off, there are so many moments of vulnerability. There's so many moments of confusion and doubt as you're shedding your skin.
Yeah.
And even in the circle that we hosted last night, and they were talking and they were sharing about how they are a bit terrified about exploring this new territory that they haven't explored before, getting to know
course.
themselves. What am I going to find here if I go down this path? Am I going to like it? Am I going to go through what we call like dark nights of the soul? Am I going to go through periods of challenge because I'm revisiting things that, you know, I locked up, put away, thought I would never have to face again? And you just sharing so openly and courageously, like your experience with losing your father and how that affected you and how that actually made you want to put it to the side in many ways and be like, I'm going to go, I'm going to be strong.
Yes.
And that's where also we talked about this, but does power equal strength in the ways that we think it equals strength?
Yeah, I was actually having this conversation on another podcast 2 days ago, where we were talking about the concept of strength and how sometimes we're obsessed with this word of like, I'm strong and I'm good and I can do this. And by the way, I was stuck in that when I first started my coaching journey. I felt like because I was a coach, I needed to always put on a strong front, right? I've got this figured out. I know I'm positive. I'm always positive. I think always like good thoughts. And I started putting this pressure on myself and kind of starting to lose the human aspect of me. And then I was like, but it feels off, right? Because your intuition always tells you when you're out of alignment. And I started feeling unhappy. And then I was like, why am I feeling unhappy? Because I'm being untruthful with myself. I'm always putting on this front of like, I'm strong, I can do this. And that made me start to redefine what strength means for me. And I was like, strength is not always being strong. Strength is not always making the right decision. Strength is not always like being assertive and, you know, a lady boss and doing everything you want to do. Maybe that's one aspect of strength, is to be able to do the things that you want to do. But also an aspect of strength for me now is to be who I am, fully, unfiltered, vulnerable. If I'm feeling something, I'm going to feel it. If I don't know an answer to something, I'm going to say I don't know. If I want a day off, I'm going to give myself permission to actually do that. And that alone made me experience a sense of strength in myself that I never knew before, because I was like, oh my God, this is empowering. It's empowering to allow myself to step. I'm getting goosebumps. Like, this is empowering because it helps me step. How can I empower other women to be themselves if I'm not allowing myself to be myself 100%? And then something in me said, enough. And I feel like moments of change, true change in our lives, always come from a moment where we say, enough. Enough with this toxic relationship. Enough with me accepting something that I don't deserve. Enough of me going to this office where I'm miserable every day. Enough with me believing that I can't do the things that I want to do. Enough. And I've had so many enough moments in my life. And after each enough comes change. And then enough, and then change. But you also said something that we forget sometimes, is that it's scary. And the reason why it's scary, because when you step into a new version of yourself, there are new choices. And with new choices comes new direction. And all of that is unknown, and the unknown is scary. But also it's exciting. There's always like an expansion. It's unlimited possibilities. I was reading a book the other day, I forgot the name. If I remember, I'll tell you. And he said that in every moment of our life we're standing, there's unlimited timelines, right?
Infinite timelines.
Infinite timelines. And he was saying that each and every timeline that we step into comes from a choice, right? So whatever choices you're making now is making you step into a certain timeline of your life, which is like, if we want to say it simply, a certain version of yourself. So if I make different choices, that's what's going to make me explore something new in my life. And then change keeps happening. But sometimes we resist that just because we don't know how to do it and we don't know where to start. Let's be very honest. I didn't know where to start when I first started. There were so many things, so many tools, so many practices, but that's why sometimes you seek help, right? Whether it's a therapist or a coach or a mentor or a friend who really knows how to give good advice, because not all of them do, but like a friend who knows how to give good advice, because sometimes you need direction. And then you start with the meditation and the yoga and things you're being called to do. And if you don't like meditation or it's not for you, I feel like for me, when I first started, was journaling, because journaling for me was the first step before I started meditation, because meditation for me was still a bit foreign. Like, what do I do when I sit with myself in silence? And then I was like, let me just at least sit with my thoughts and become aware of them. What am I thinking? So I used to write. And then with writing comes like, this is why this is happening. Oh, this is why this and that. And one thing started to lead to another, and I started becoming more comfortable with sitting with my thoughts. Then I was like, I don't want to write anymore. I just want to be inside my body. And then you start taking it one step at a time. But like, because I feel we went in so many different directions, I feel like stepping into a sense of empowerment within yourself is so many things. It's understanding that you have a sense of agency, remembering that you can make choices in your life. It's not being strong all the time. It's allowing yourself to be who you are and meeting yourself where you are with compassion. With compassion, because I was a type A personality where it's like, I'm going to keep going. I'm going to do this. I'm going to be good at everything I do. And then I was like, but I'm tired and I'm burnt out and I don't want to do it anymore. And I just want to be here with myself and be like, what do you want? And sometimes it's, what do you need? And then give that to myself because I need it. And I can't keep going on the way I'm going on because I need to choose myself sometimes.
I would also add to that beautiful list of yours, remembering your worth.
Yes.
Reminds you of your power naturally, because it's like, when I feel worthy, then I feel powerful. I feel like those two go hand in hand. And
Yeah.
also based off of the things that you were sharing, like, blocking out your calendar for a day, that's freedom. So empowerment is freedom. You feel free when you're empowered. And it's not that you're empowered that you are taking away someone else's power. And I think that this is where I've started to see this, especially right now with everything that's going on in the world. It's people have this fear around power. I had fear around my own power, right?
Yeah.
Because you associate power with being aggressive or being abusive or having the last word or being able to do stuff that makes you feel powerless. That's how we sometimes associate power. People that, have certain looks or money or this or that, then they're powerful, right? Because they get to decide for the greater whole. And so I would say a lot of people's collective belief is that being powerful is bad.
Yeah.
Versus actually, when I am empowered, I am moving in alignment with the will of the divine. And that is activating so many things on the earthly plane, where I'm making a difference, whether it's in my own family dynamics, my friendships, my communities. And to not underestimate that, because you don't think that your power is reaching the whole entire world in the ways that we've been taught that power is. And something that I really believe is that there's no greater power than the power of love.
Yeah.
Like, what is greater than that? Like, love is one of the greatest healers and energies that we can tap into, again, like you said, sometimes in the simple acts that we do every day. Just simple things. And we forget that that is also really powerful. To choose to love when everything in this world is telling you to hate, when everything in this world is teaching you that you have to keep pushing through fatigue, grief, sorrow, to be like, wait a minute, I love myself enough to know that I need a break, that I need to rest.
Yes, that's so powerful. So powerful. When you said also we're scared of our light, right? We're scared of like, what if I can do this? What if I'm actually capable? And it's scary sometimes. What if I'm powerful? And what does it mean for me? It's so unknown. Like, I remember when I first started this journey, I was in the car and I was listening to a coach. Her name is Lisa something. I'm not really good with names, as you can tell. I keep forgetting everything.
At least you're honest about it and not say like Lisa X-ray.
Like, come up with a random name. Yeah. And she was saying that how we sometimes we're scared of failure, but sometimes we're even more scared of success. Mm-hmm. And it touched me so much. And I was crying and crying in the car, because she was saying sometimes we're even more scared of making it. We're more scared of being that version of ourselves. We're scared because we don't know what to do with it. What if I step into the light, into my light? What if I step into my power? What do I do with it then? And it becomes too scary. And I went home and I just kept crying, because I was like, yes, I am. And I have been scared of stepping into my light. And it stayed with me for a very long time, being scared or super scared of taking up space, right? Because sometimes you're being told like you're being too much, or just be quiet now, or you talk a lot, like shh, right? And then you start shushing yourself and you're like, let me just be quiet, or let me just not be annoying, or let me just be like not too much. I don't want to be too much. So let me just like shrink myself so I'm not too much, right? And I did that for a very long time, where I used to shrink myself around people, because I do have a big personality. I have a big personality and I still have a big personality, but I used to not let it come out. And I used to go into any room and like I make friends easily. I talk to everyone. I like to network. I laugh so much in my life. Like, that's me. But I used to go and be like, don't be too much. Or if everyone gives me attention, I'll try to like divert attention away from me, because I don't want to be too much. But then I was like, until when? Until when? I'm not going to allow myself to live the light that was God given to me. And we all have that light, and we all hold it sometimes like deep within ourselves and hide it. But then I was like, not anymore. Because if I have a vision for the life that I want for myself, it's not going to come with me hiding my light. I'm not going to be able to have the life that I want to have. And I'm not saying a certain direction or vision. I'm just saying, like, if I want to live the kind of life I want to live and feel the kind of emotions I want to feel, I need to step into my light. And with that comes a lot of resistance, because then again, the backstories of like, don't be too much. But then sometimes you just need to see the story and be like, I'm going to choose a new story. And I'm going to step into that today and be like, and tell myself that I'm not being too much, and be like, and it's okay, be too much. You're allowed to be too much. And if I ever have a daughter anywhere, at any time in my life, I would always tell her, be you, take up space. Take up space. I feel like with women, especially like at work, I used to see like in meetings, I would sit and like a man would walk into the room. I'm so sorry because we have a man with us here. With all love to all men, I love my husband so much. But like a man would walk into the room and would easily take up space. But then a woman would come into the room and be like, what do I do with this, right?
Tiptoeing, walking on eggshells.
Yes. Or if you see a woman step in and like take up space, that's triggering to a lot of women, right?
It is triggering to women especially, I was going to say as well, right?
To women, because she represents to us what we're not allowing ourselves to do, and then it's triggering. So then I was like, not anymore. If I have something that I want to say, I'm going to say it. If I have a boundary that I want to set, I'm going to set it. And it's allowing yourself to talk to your inner child, and you do a lot of work around that. And I do a lot of work around that, because I believe this is where it starts. It's your inner child. Like, you go back and say, be too much. You're allowed. I give you permission, and you're going to be loved, and you're going to be safe when you're too much.
It's so interesting because you got the don't be too much.
Yeah.
I got because I didn't really get that growing up. For me, it was more like being so afraid to speak the truth. So one of the things that I really had to work through was actually the power of my expression and my voice, because that to me was terrifying. And I really did struggle with that for a very long time. So it wasn't the too muchness for me that kept me from experiencing my power. It was more like, don't say the truth. Don't speak the truth, because it's disturbing us. It bothers us to hear what you have to say. Because the things that I remember saying this even to people back in high school. You know, they used to judge a lot, gossip a lot, and not to say I never fell into that trap. I definitely did. But there were a lot of times where I was like, but do we know what this person is experiencing? Do we know what's going on at home for them to be acting this way? Like maybe they're going through some really dark times and you have no idea what's going on. And you're here like talking about them as if it's so easy to bring another person down. People didn't like that response.
Of course.
They don't want to hear that. And it started to make me feel like I don't want to speak, because I obviously don't want to sound like I'm preaching or I'm being a preacher in any way, but it's more like I'm speaking this because I'm feeling this. I'm speaking this because it's what I'm currently, you know,
It's
called
true for me,
to express in this moment. And I did experience a lot of times people trying to shut that voice down. So for me, really, truly, also empowerment has been about speaking my truth, no matter how uncomfortable, and also speaking it as much as I possibly can, sometimes with love and compassion. But sometimes if that's not my truth, then the best thing I can do is to speak anger, if that's what I'm feeling. You know, it's like you said, meeting yourself where you are. Do I always need to be expressing it in the ways that you want to hear it? Can I not express it sometimes in the ways that don't please you, that might trigger you? And for me right now, the answer is yes. Maybe in a year from now, I'll be like, no, I don't believe that anymore. But, you know, I think with especially everything that's going on in the world, how many people are afraid to truly express what they're feeling with the situation?
Yeah, because it's also part of the program too, right? Like, get in line. So if everyone's gossiping, you get in line.
Yeah.
If everyone's doing this, you get in line. In fashion, if everyone's buying something, you get in line. If everyone believes something, you get in line. And if you even dare to think differently or try to be differently or just to step into your own truth, everyone's going to be like, no, get in line, right? And then you keep going back to that over and over again of like, get in line. And I feel like I was talking to a friend of mine about this today of like, I no longer want to step in line. And that for me is also part of self-empowerment, is to say, you know what? I'm going to step outside of the line. Even when we're kids, like you're coloring, color inside the line. I don't want to color inside the freaking line. I want to color the entire page. And everyone's like, we're being tamed since we're children.
Yeah.
Like everything needs to be inside the line. And then you live inside the line and be inside the line. But like never, nothing exciting ever happens inside the line. Oh, now we're looking at the world, only scary things happen inside the line because it's a matrix and we live inside that. So I think it's time for us to just step into the true sense and meaning of empowerment, because this is where our liberation is going to come from, of saying, you know what? Yes, you're trying to make us believe this, but we're going to allow ourselves to come at it differently.
Empowerment is definitely the embrace of all facets of you, including like your quirkiness, your wittiness, your like mistakes, your all the different parts. It's like, well, I'm not just this one version. And actually, like you said, I don't want to be in this line. This line is one too long. I don't like queuing. And also, we've been in this line for far too long with zero progress. So you know what? Actually, I'm gonna
choose a new
switch
line.
lanes, and this is now the lane that I'm picking. And it's not necessarily because I'm looking for people to be like, oh, I want to follow this. It's more like, this is what feels good to me. Go and find what feels good to you, right? And with that came the realization that perhaps what is empowering to me is not empowering to someone else.
Yes.
And they want to choose to color inside the line, and that makes them feel empowered.
Yes.
And that's totally fair and totally fine. Versus, I feel like you and I, knowing our human designs, we're not really the ones to do that.
Yeah.
We're the fire starters, the initiators, the ones that really get things started for people. And it tends to be more unconventional. And something that hasn't been done before. So of course it's gonna look weird and feel weird. And so with this conversation also is just to remind people that embrace the fact that you think different, that you feel different, that you want different. Like, we're not here to be like, you know, the Stepford Wives where we're all like replicates of one another. And we've seen that across the board, right? Like, this is what beautiful is. This is what we want. This is what we're looking to achieve, whether it's like this American dream or like whatever it is that we think we want. And it's like, actually, no.
Yeah.
I want
Sometimes
something
it's
else.
just as simple as that. It's saying no. It's saying, you know what? You're giving me this, but I'm not signing up for it. I want to
Unsubscribe, unfollow.
Exactly, unfollow. I've been doing this a lot
Me
lately.
too.
Like unsubscribe, unfollow. And I feel like if I'd like to say just one last thing, it would be just like we owe it to ourselves to remember our power, because our power is where we create change, is where we do things for ourselves and also for other people, is where we actually create the things that we came here to create. It's how we choose to live our authentic selves and be who we are, unfiltered, with the flaws, with the shadow, with the light, with all of it. It's not about like being this perfect person. No, none of us are perfect, and it's so unfair to expect perfectionism from ourselves. I think it's just about meeting yourself where you are with what you know now. Like you said, next year maybe I'll change my mind. It's just saying, what do I want to do with everything that I have for me now, and with the level of awareness that I have now? And then if I just want to say one last thing is, remember that you have a choice. Always. Even when you don't think you have a choice, you always have a choice. And that for me was truly life-changing until today. I have a choice. And if I remember that, I remember that I'm responsible for the choices that I make. And then if I was making not the best choices, I'll try to make better ones, and then better ones, and then better ones.
I really love that so much. And honestly, such a beautiful, heart opening conversation with you, as always.
Yes.
You and I host, to be fair, some of the most
Powerful.
incredible, powerful women's circles. And so, whether you're in Dubai or in Kuwait, just make sure that you join one of these circles,
Yes.
especially if you're afraid of women's circles, especially if they feel daunting to
Yeah.
you. There is something there for you to experience that can be a portal to your own awakening, to the parts of yourself that you might have ignored or dismissed or kind of lives in the shadows. And that's what we're here to do, is really bring back the shadow into our lives so that we're aware. Oh, okay, I'm a doubtful person. I doubt my power. Oh, it's true. Sometimes I don't feel like I'm worthy. I'm going to fall into this trap sometimes when I'm expanding into that new version of myself. If I have that level of awareness, then I can navigate these things with a little bit more ease and comfort, regardless of whether it's going to be a success or not, because I've done this before, and you keep doing it again and
Yes.
again. And repetition does help for sure, you know,
Yes.
like,
And you also, I want to say, like, when you talked about the circle last night, because last night was our latest circle and it was
yes.
amazing and super
It
magical.
was your favorite circle so far. You always
Every
say that.
circle.
Sorry to the
Every-
other circles.
Yes, every circle I leave, I'm like, I always tell you, every circle, I'm like, this is my favorite one. But I feel like every circle is different. And I, again, to all the women who would love to experience women's circles, I always feel like it reminds you that you're not alone. Every circle, when women come at first, you notice the energy of like, oh, like maybe I'll not share, maybe I'll just listen. But then as the circle goes, everyone starts to share, and vulnerability opens up so many things for us, of like saying, this is how I'm feeling. And then someone else is like, me too. And then you're like, me too. And this is why women come together. We come together to be honest and vulnerable with ourselves, but also with each other. And also to actually receive healing, right? In the power of the circle, to be like, this is how I feel and this is what I want to do about it. So I hear a lot from so many people around me that women's circles are not for me. But I always say women's circles are actually for all women, no matter like your age, what you're going through in your life. Women's circles are for you because there's always a space for everyone. And it's healing, by the way. Every time I come to a women's circle, even if we're hosting it, it's also healing for me.
Me too.
And every circle, new things come up, and it's always so powerful. So I believe in them. I believe in their power, and I hope that me and you continue doing them until like.
Till we're old and
Until
gray,
we're old
you
and gray.
know? Like, I'm so
100%.
down to do that till we're old and gray.
Me
And
too.
just a fun fact about women's circles that I love is that so much healing takes place in a women's circle, far more than in a therapy session. And this isn't to discredit therapy at all. It's more to say that when you are witnessed by other people, by other women, in your pain, in your story, that witnessing heals you on a much deeper level. You're actually putting into practice the things that you've been talking about nonstop with your therapist. You're actually
Yes.
putting it into real life practice. I'm going to share this and be vulnerable with other people and have them hold me in that space without judgment, without comparison, without gossip. Right? It's like,
Yes.
I'm gonna hold you in that space. And that's actually a wound that so many women have, is the sister wound.
Yeah.
So you're like really recreating a new belief system about what it means to be around other powerful women that are embodying their light. And women's circles have changed my life, and I've seen it change the lives of other people, including the women
Yes.
that we have hosted before that still message me to this day
Yes.
and are like, this was exactly what I needed to catalyze me, initiate me, and take me further onto my into my purpose. So I feel like it's really, really powerful, and it might not seem as powerful because we make it look really beautiful and we have like such a nice time, but so much can happen through your presence and presence with other women.
Yes, because softness can be powerful too, right? Like
It is
it's just a
power.
very soft space. And I love seeing women when they come. There's like, they're so tense, but then they step into their softness, right? And they let go. And seeing them step into their softness is so, so amazing, because you look at them and you're like, you've arrived. Like,
Yeah.
this is you. You've brought yourself to the circle.
It's like, whoa, I get to remove my mask.
Exactly.
And be accepted.
And still be safe and be loved.
Yeah, exactly.
But always, the answer is always yes. So like you said, until we're old and gray.
Until we're old and gray,
Yes.
girls. Like, definitely. I love
sure.
hosting them with you so
Me
much.
too.
And thank you for your time today.
I loved
Thank
being
you
here
for
so much.
sitting down with me and for always being authentic, honest, vulnerable. I felt empowered through many of the parts that you were sharing. And it was like, ooh, I want to adjust my spine a bit more. And like, I feel differently after this conversation.
I loved it. Thank you for having me. I enjoyed every minute, of course. And it felt like just us chatting.
I know. At one point, I was like, just imagine the microphones aren't
Yes.
here. And go into your living room and it's a
love
chill
it.
conversation.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm going to come and
Thank
give
you.
you a hug.
Of course.
I like to give hugs. Oh, thank you, girl. I love you.